Hi, everyone. Today, we're here to discuss an incredibly difficult topic, which is unfortunately present in our daily lives. We're witnessing this now live, which is genocide. It's the annihilation of an entire group of people. We're not going to be discussing the humanitarian or the economic or the legal aspects of it, but rather the psychology behind genocide. Why would or how could ordinary people do such terrible things? Are people born evil? Social psychology, the study of how we think about, influence, and relate to each other, could provide very powerful insights in order to understand the core of genocide, why it might happen, how things might develop into allowing for genocide to occur and encouraging or supporting genocide, or as we're currently witnessing in Gaza, the lack of any actions being done. This is very important to understand that this is in no way giving an excuse to the actions and the atrocities being committed in Gaza, but rather to understand the psychology so that we can learn to see how media, what we do and what we read, what we're exposed to could prime us and potentially allow us to think and act in a way that enables genocide. And then to learn what propaganda does and how we might hopefully in the future stop genocide or not have one committed in the first place. Never again for anyone. So without further ado, let's start with the psychology behind genocide. There are certain key psychological factors that would potentially explain how individuals can get involved. First point, it's the obedience to authority or the power of following orders. This is very important because people do have a strong tendency to do what they are told by someone who they see or perceive as having authority, even if those orders do harm or do require you to harm someone else. There was a very famous study by a psychologist, Stanley Milgram, who did experiments on this, and in order to understand how people in the Second World War tried to defend that they were just following orders, which of course was rejected by the courts. About 65% of participants in this study by Stanley Milgram were willing to administer what they thought personally were dangerous levels of electric shocks to another person just because the experimenter, who was wearing a lab coat and was therefore in a position of authority, told them to continue. This is likely to shift the individual into a different state where they would see themselves as carrying out someone else's will or someone else's orders, which would take away their personal responsibility, and it becomes that person's responsibility. We have seen this in many instances where people have been following orders in atrocities, whether it was in the Holocaust, in Rwanda, or currently in Gaza. The second very important factor is conformity, or basically going along with a group. We are generally social creatures. We are heavily influenced by people around us and what we see as being normal. In the context of genocide, pressure or group pressure can be immense. In Rwanda, for example, there was a very gradual shift in what was considered to be acceptable behavior. And this is key because what's happening in Gaza, for example, has also been a gradual shift to what society and what people perceive as the new normal. Seeing atrocities being committed at first might be a shock, but then this becomes the new normal. And sometimes it doesn't even lead to massive media coverage. So once people do start to obey authority and violence begins, the power of confirming to a group overpowers. And therefore, putting people in groups like military units or youth groups will make them feel that they're more anonymous, and therefore they are less likely to be personally responsible for their actions. So when they're part of a group and they get along with the group and they conform to that group's standards of what's acceptable behavior, it diffuses their personal responsibility. They become anonymous within that group, and they become less personally responsible for their actions. A third factor, which is very important, is the dehumanization of a group. And in this instance, it's the us versus them kind of thinking, or the us versus them bias, the in-group and the out-group. In this instance, we categorize people into groups. So it's the us group and the them group. And usually we do want our own group to look good, or we want what happens to our group to be positive. And therefore, the leaders do exploit this by emphasizing certain identity of the group and by creating a division. It first starts with stigmatization. This is where you target the group, the other group, with negative labels or symbols. And this has been done, for example, in Gaza by calling Palestinian people or the Gazans as human animals. This would allow you and allow the people within the group to treat them differently. Comes the dehumanization, which is exactly that follows stigmatization, where you treat them, you label them, you portray them as less than human, whether they're as animals or as diseases. This is crucial because propaganda here in the media is being used as a crucial tool to spread such stereotypes, to spread such negative images, to dehumanize your enemy or the other group. And this would allow them and makes it easier to treat them differently and eventually to harm them. There is a moral disengagement, or where you turn off your moral compass. This is where you see the targeted group as someone who is increasingly different from you, maybe subhuman even. This is a moral disengagement. So in this way, you might talk about transporting people to another location, ethnically cleansing those. You might also blame the victims, targeting those that are victimized and arguing that they somehow deserve what's happening to them. This helps build an individual's own belief in the world, and it helps them reduce their own guilt. This is a process that's called moral exclusion. And where the rules of morality that you apply to your own group don't apply to the target group. So as if they are subhuman or different. In times of crisis, there's also a very important element of blaming others for your problems. This is where you scapegoat. So if there is economic problems, if there's political instability, if there's frustration, if there's fear, this leads to scapegoating. And if there's a target group, this is the easiest target to blame for your own problems. So you might see that politicians and leaders would exploit this frustration. And that's where the leaders would use powerful ideologies and belief systems where they promise that once this target group is removed, then there will be a better future. There will be a more promising future. So they use propaganda, they use the media to spread those ideas, to create those divisions, to reinforce the biases, the stigmatization, the dehumanization that they've created, would eventually lead to elimination of empathy towards this targeted group. And controlling the media and what the media portrays is a key part of this. So as you see, it's not an argument of whether or not people are born evil or they're made this way, not a nature versus nurture discussion. However, it's about a very powerful combination of psychological factors. The continuation of a genocide in Gaza to be stopped, put an end to this, and never again to anyone. So this is what I've learned about the psychology of genocide. I really hope you enjoyed this video, despite its very difficult topic. And I would continue to share things that I learn. So please subscribe and comment and share this video. Thank you very much.